Right, joining us now for his perspective on accountability and leadership processes in the United Kingdom is political analyst, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. Prof, good evening. Good to have you with us tonight here on In Focus. 3 prime ministers, of course, when the successor comes on in that country since the last election. Is this what you call democracy? Is this what you call political accountability?
It's a political game. That's all I can say. No, but on a serious note, I think that Truss has made history. The closest we got into this was in 1827 when George Kennan, in fact, was in office for 119 days. But this one is history in the making. Of course, if you look at it from the negative side, you might say that there is political instability in the UK, and more especially political instability within the Conservative Party, which will then give the Labour Party an edge should the early election be called in, as others have just suggested. Yeah. But then on the other side, there are those who would be holding the view that, in fact, it's honorable to realize that you have failed the country and you have failed your party, and then you must just exit the stage gracefully. So if you look at it from that vantage point, then you might say that the step that was taken by Liz Truss is in fact the correct one under the circumstances.
I'm sure where she's sitting, she might be wondering, and many around her might also be wondering, how did it collapse so quickly around her and right before her eyes? How did she get it so wrong?
No, you can't build a mansion, Butabo, on a shaky ground because it's going to fall anytime. I think that the Conservative Party, in fact, are to blame for this, not just Liz Truss on her own. If you bite more than you can chew, this is the result that you get. You have a situation that is affecting the entire globe, and then the UK has just moved out of the EU, and we are basically dealing with a lot of other issues, some of which we refer to as exogenous causal factors. In other words, factors that are outside of your control. And then we still also have some endogenous factors, those that have to do with divisions within the Conservative Party. So a combination of all of those factors brought us to where we are right now. So in other words, even if she resigns like she has just done, anyone who is going to come in, unless you change the status quo within the Conservative Party, the end result will be the same. Because it is the same fate that Boris Johnson faced, and then now it is Liz Truss, although in this case it's even worse, 45 days and then exit the stage. So she only got her salary once. I'm not sure if they will pay her for the quarter of the other month, which she didn't finish. But the reality of the matter, history has been made in the UK, and then you can look at it from whatever angle, you will arrive at a conclusion.
I'm sure her salary is the least of her worries right now. But there are some relationships economically that we have with the United Kingdom and other bilaterals that are probably not economic as well. The kind of political instability that is there, should it bother us at all?
No, it has to bother us because anything that happens in any country in the world will affect us either directly or indirectly. Like you've just correctly pointed out, we have bilateral relations or binational commissions with a number of countries. So if there is political and economic instability in country A, then of course that affects country B. In this case, us being country B in this example. So if you look at it from that angle, then you might say that we have a reason to be concerned. But then on the other hand, if the British pound weakens, then they should also assist us somewhat. Because if the British pound is strong and the rand is weak, then that is also disadvantageous to us. So in other words, you lose on the one hand, but you gain on the other. So, but in the main, we should be concerned.
It must be quite embarrassing, though, for the United Kingdom to be going through such turbulent times, especially with Boris Johnson and now with Liz Truss, and having to do a flip somersault on that mini-budget plan that Liz Truss and her allies, Kwasi Kwarteng, drew up.
Indeed, and one of the mistakes that Liz Truss made, in fact, was to kick out Kwasi, because this is one person who has supported her all out, and then all of a sudden you remove him and you replace him with Jeremy Hunt, who was a supporter of the contender to the position. So that, of course, raises some questions of trust. Can you trust this leader? If I've been supporting you all along, The moment you ascend into the position of authority, you then kick me out immediately without any reason. So that in itself is in fact a disaster for any leader, not just the one that we are talking about right now.
And as far as what you've mentioned earlier on, some are calling for a complete reset to allow the actual people of the United Kingdom to be the ones who vote or at least participate in the election of the next Prime Minister and not the party itself. Do you think that would be the kind of reset that the United Kingdom would require right now?
I fully support that. I heard the Labour Party, in fact, is making that call, saying that 2025 is too far. I agree entirely with that. And then, of course, the Scottish First Minister has also concurred, saying that they should have an early election. Because the reason why I agree with them is because if you look at the contenders for this position, at the moment you don't know exactly who the contenders will be. But already there are people who are saying that even Boris Johnson should consider coming back, and then they want to support him. So basically it means the Conservative Party have run out of options. So whoever they are appointed to this position or the election to this position is most likely not going to finish the term as well. So why not call an early election and then let people decide who their leaders should be, as opposed to just leaving it to the Tories playing this political game that we're talking about. Because it doesn't really matter who you put in place. The reality of the matter is the Conservative Party, at this moment, they've run out of options, they've run out of ideas, they have nothing fresh to offer, and unfortunately, they don't have any leader who's going to unite the Conservative Party, let alone the UK as a whole.
So whoever comes in next, many are saying, will inherit a mess either way, and would that define their administration as well, or would they be able to come up with something different?
Butabo, before I answer our question, you know what happened in Zimbabwe with the so-called New Dawn, and you know what happened in South Africa with the so-called New Dawn and the so-called 9 lost years. It was exactly what is happening in the UK. You come in, you blame everything to your predecessor, and then you come with high expectations. You set the bar too high for yourself, and when you fail to deliver, you run out of things to say to the nation. This is exactly what has happened. Because when Boris Johnson came in, he blamed his predecessor, and then when this one came in, she said, "Okay, I'm now going to steer the ship to the right direction." And look at where we've ended. So it means that any other person who's going to come in is most likely to find himself or herself in the same situation. So it means that if the formula remains the same, you can change those who implement it, you will arrive at the same conclusion. So that's why I've lost hope that the Tories will change things for the better. Anyone who's going to come in will change one or two things, but the rest will either remain the same or they'll get even worse, like we've seen with the Truss.
So we have to bring it back here at home, of course, in terms of what is happening there. Others are assessing the situation, saying, well, this is what fractionalism actually does. It breaks the party in more ways than you can count in one hand. And Boris Johnson had his loyalists, and of course that divided the party. And is there a way in which a single person can come in and be able to have tribes, all the tribes, accept this one leader? That question for South Africa, riddled with fractionalism. Will we be able to do that kind of a turnaround?
If we are able to learn, we should learn lessons from the UK. If we fail, then we are not even going to be classified as slow learners. You remember when we went to school and then we were told that they were slow learners. If we fail to learn from the UK, then of course we will be in a worse situation than the UK. On two fronts. One, factionalism is in fact a recipe for disaster, because it means that if you are fighting the so-called enemy, you are facing the enemy not knowing that there are 5 other enemies behind you. Before you know it, you'll be bleeding while the enemy is in front of you, and the enemy never threw even a stone, and you'll wonder how come you are bleeding. But it's because of the people who called comrades who are fighting you from within. That is one disadvantage of factionalism. But then also on the other hand is that the reputation of the party that you represent is at stake. If you don't perform, your party looks bad, and then eventually your country also looks bad, because investor confidence will go down, like you saw with the British pound going down significantly. So it means that factionalism is in fact a recipe for disaster. I just hope and pray that our leaders can learn a lesson from what has happened in the UK and do things differently.
Professor Mngomezulu, much appreciated as always. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. That is a political analyst, Professor Bheki Mngomezulu.